Right, this is question 3 of the component 3 lower 6 in-class book. It's quite a difficult question in places, is this. So when you said at interview that you loved the heart as a topic, I want to know more about the heart. Well, here it is. So coronary heart disease, a little bit of blurb around that, and it's narrowing of the coronary arteries. Which of the blood vessels A to F could an atheroma develop that could cause angina? Right, so what have we got? We've got a bunch of tubes at the top, so those are going to be the arteries and the veins, aorta, pulmonary artery, vena cava and pulmonary vein, and then we've got the odd one out, the coronary arteries. Well, these are the coronary arteries are the ones on the surface that supply the actual muscle itself. So we're looking at E there, we can see them, they're going to the heart muscle. These are just transport tubes to other places in the body. So it's going to be E and the name of them, coronary arteries. Coronary arteries. Explain why narrowing could lead to the heart not contracting. Well, this heart, how does it contract? It's got muscle. What does a muscle need? The muscle needs nutrients and energy. So it needs glucose, oxygen, needs to make ATP to contract. And these coronary arteries supply that. So we just need to split that up into two. So muscle needs, that muscle, what does it need? It needs O2, or you could say glucose, to make ATP to contract. And these coronary arteries supply those. So coronary arteries supply the O2 or the glucose. And so that won't happen. Part B, the jugular vein carries blood back from the heart via the vena cava. No valves between the jugular vein and the heart, therefore no pressure in the jugular vein. Right, where are we? So if we draw this heart, so we have got a heart. Let's draw it a bit. Let's draw it a bit bigger. Just okay. So we've got a heart. Draw it like that. The heart is split up into two. We've got some pipes going in and we've got pipes going out, and then draw that going down there, and then we can draw that sort of across there. So we've got the left side, as you look at it, left atrium, right atrium, left ventricle, right ventricle, and we've got some semilunar valves up there. So this is our bicuspid valve, this is our tricuspid valve, these are our semilunar valves. Blood is coming in here, going out there. This is the aorta, this is the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery sends blood to the lungs, so to the lungs, that'll come back in via the pulmonary vein, then it'll go to the body via the aorta, so to the body, and then that will, for example, head, and then that'll come back in there, and that'll be the vena cava. But the head one, from the head, the tube back from the head will be the jugular vein, which is the one it's talking about. So it's this one that we're talking about in this question. So we are talking about the one that goes into the right atrium. So this is the right atrium here. So this is the right atrium, this is the left atrium, and you can't really see the division here, but most of this is the kind of left ventricle, and the right ventricle is just tucked away there. So this is the tube that we are most interested in. So where's the question? There we go. So it's going to be B there. State the name of the stages of the cardiac cycle in which the tricuspid valve is open. Right, tricuspid valve is open. Here's our tricuspid valve. So this is open when we are getting the atrium contracting and forcing blood into the right ventricle. So the right atrium contracting, that's atrial systole. Atrial systole. So, which, remember, valves, they don't open and shut because you want them to. They open and shut because you push on them. And if the right atrial wall contracts, that lowers the volume, increases the pressure, and blood is now at higher pressure in the right atrium than it is the ventricle, and is forced through this valve which opens. And then if we're asking when does it close, well, it closes when this right ventricle contracts and blood, the volume of this decreases, the pressure increases, and blood will move away, and it'll try and go through this valve, but the valve will shut and blood will move out in this direction into the pulmonary artery. So when does this valve close, the tricuspid valve? When the right ventricle contracts, and the name for that is ventricular systole. So ventricular systole, or systole. You could say contraction, but it's better to use the right words. Right, and there's a awful 4 marks at the end. Suggest what causes the increase in pressure in the jugular vein in the regions labelled A and B on the graph. So this is tricky stuff. It did tell us some information. What did it tell us that's relevant here? Nothing on there. There's our jugular vein. There are no valves between the jugular vein and the heart. Okay, so the jugular vein and the heart, so it's saying here there's no valves between that jugular vein and the heart. So tricuspid valve is open, so in atrial systole. So in atrial systole, this is happening, this contraction, and so it's forcing blood into the right ventricle, but it could also be forcing blood away into the jugular vein, couldn't it? So it could go up there. So that's our first, more obvious answer. So pressure increases at A due to increase in atrial pressure, and it's told us that there are no valves to prevent that. There are no valves to prevent this. So you normally think as veins. You normally think of veins as having valves that will be closed by any movement of blood. So there's 2 marks, and then at B, well, when this tricuspid valve is closed, well, that's when we've got this ventricle contracting. So if this is closed, well, blood flowing or being squeezed or due to gravity going down here, that could increase the pressure. So if we mention, there's actually another mark for atrial systole, atrial pressure. So if we said here, so I'll go back, atrial systole, that's a third mark there. So at B, so that was A, at B we've got the atrium filling with blood and this valve closed. So atrium filling with blood, that will increase that pressure. And we could also say that with the ventricles contracting, that could that's going to close the valve. They're actually giving you a mark for that, even though okay, a bit of a strange mark, but we could have slight pushing, squeezing of this atrium due to the right ventricle contracting as a possibility. That's a tricky mark to say. So ventricle contracts, so closes tricuspid valve. So ventricle contracts, that's what closes that, so that means when this fills, that will increase the pressure. And ventricular pressure pushes on atrial wall, so pushes on that atrium, and that could also increase the pressure there at B. Really tricky, those last 4. That's why in this 11 marks you needed the easy stuff of naming coronary arteries, what they do in terms of oxygen, and knowing about the contractions. Good luck with that.